Good. I'm
Okay.
happy. Thank you. Wonderful to see you again, Mr. Adodo, and have the possibility of meeting 6 new students. You were saying something about the book.
Thank you. Yes, we discussed about the book yesterday, and we also had a look at your website, your school website, and many of them, at least 3 or 4 of them, they are very interested in education. And we are talking about alternative to the kind of education that we have in Africa. In Nigeria, we graduate students every year. We have students in primary school who are all doing the same thing, the same curricula, and we are thinking of alternatives. What about students who cannot cope? Is there any provision for them? So we are just thinking around all this. So we now spoke about this book, and I'm happy that you want to talk about this book because I know it inspired you to start your own school. And I remember 2 years ago, you told me change your orientation to life. So we'd like to hear you, and then we can ask questions after that. Over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I've got I suppose I didn't have, Mr. Adodo asked me just recently to join, so I didn't really have time to prepare a really nice presentation about the book. But I do want to give you a bit of the story about the book, and then I can say a few things that I feel that inspire me about the book. I was teaching in India. In fact, it's my beginning of my teaching career because I just come out of a master's degree. You're all master's students, I believe. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I had just finished a master's degree in rural South African issues around electricity, and that wasn't going to be my love of my life and my passion. And I was 26 years old, and I decided I needed a break, and I was able to get to India and travel for a long time in India, 6 months around India. And I didn't want to just be a tourist. And in my connections through my master's, someone gave me a contact in Delhi, and I phoned the man up when I was in Delhi, and I said, I'm looking for something interesting to do in India. Please, do you have any ideas? And he says, well, do you want to teach in a school? And I said, that would be great. I'd never taught in a school before. And so he sent me to a school after an interview, after meeting him. He sent me to his school in rural India, in a tiny village called Bali, which even Indian people don't know, which is outside a town called Falna, which is in the state of Rajasthan, in the desert. And it's a school that was started by the company called Fab India, and it was coincidentally a very interesting school. I was lucky that the school I was sent to was alternative and innovative. And the principal himself was schooled in the Krishnamurti system. I'm not sure if you know about Judo Krishnamurti. We've got one of our teachers in grade R in Kairos School is schooled herself and taught most of her teaching life in Krishnamurti School in England, in a school called Brockwood Park. And in the school I found myself in India. It's called Fab India School. I was very, very inspired by this position. I suddenly discovered that teaching was for me. In fact, I remember the moment that I was teaching English and very boring topic called at just grammar. I was just teaching grammar pronouns to students, and it was feeling like I was part of a choreography of a play, and we were all actors and we were all participating with joy and fun. And there was very little pressure from the system, which is relevant to this book. And we didn't have much pressure from the principal or the curriculum or the government. We were able to be very creative. And I was living at the time in the headmaster's house, this man called Vishnu Kant. He had a spare room and I lived in his room, and he had a bookshelf of interesting books. And one of the books on his bookshelf was this book, School is Dead. And on the weekends and afternoons, I read this book just because it was interesting to me. I picked it up and started reading it. And it was absolutely profound. I was totally overwhelmed by what the book was saying about how problematic schools are in the world. And this is mainly set in America. And I finished the book. I finished the last page, and I remember holding the book up in front of me, and I said to myself and to the room, I said, this book is going to change my life. And it has. It's changed my life. And I ended up realizing that I need to do something in education. And I ended up coming back from India, researching ways of finding a way into education. And I decided that if I'm going to do anything in education, I better be a teacher at least. And I ended up becoming a Steiner teacher because I found that was the best way, at least in South Africa, to be a creative teacher, to be a little bit freer than a conventional teacher. And I trained as a Steiner Waldorf school teacher. And the book still continued in the back of my mind to say I need to do something myself. And at that point, I started collecting books about schools and education. And those are the books still now today in our school library. And we are now 11 years in. We're 11 years old school. I think we're going into our 12th year tomorrow. It's been very, very difficult, very, very stressful. I've lots of sleepless nights and lots of emotions and tensions, and yet we're surviving and we are coping. And maybe I can share a little bit about the school, but first I want to share a bit about the book, because that's what I've been requested. So before I continue, is there any thoughts, questions? Should I continue and talk about the book?
Yes,
okay. So let me just see how this works. I've got this, a brief presentation. Let's see, it goes here, and I'm hoping it works because the Zoom settings have changed recently. There. So just to give you a bit of a historical context, I think might help. Let me just move this. Sorry, I'm going to move this here and then play. Good. So there was something happening in the world, in America, I would say, in the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War is the late 1960s and around then, early 1970s. And in this time, a lot of academics in America were very, very critical of the war, of the fact that America had gone to war in Vietnam. They couldn't believe that after the World War II and the difficulties that happened in the World War II and the huge amount of deaths in World War II, America found itself again in another war. There was still the Korean War after the World War II, and then this Vietnam War. And at this time, something happened in the community of researchers and academics in America. And there was suddenly a lot of books that were very critical of schools. At the time, around 1969, 1970, 1971, a lot of books came out criticizing schools that could produce graduates that became leaders of America that would send young Americans all around the world into war that was questionable, and where they were not, it wasn't an obvious just war. There was a question of the ethical place that America found themselves in this war. There was a lot of criticism, and not just criticism in the protests from the students, but the professors and the lecturers and the academics of America were joining the resistance and the critique of this war. And so here I've just found two pictures of the Vietnam War, where you've got the leaders of America. I can't remember who this is, actually. I should know, but this is an American politician. I don't know. I think he might be the president at the time, and he was creating the fact that the war was happening. And on the right, we've got the school that these leaders of America came from. They were schooled in this kind of system, and you've got this American flag there and a very strong nationalist system, are very proud of America. And you've also got this idea that there's rows and the idea of what schools are and what schools do. And this was raised a lot of questions, that this kind of school on the right, where students are sitting in rows, and I think even you've got a system on this picture where you've got boys on the right and girls on the left, and you've got very straight rows, but this very straight rows are also part of the curriculum that this government is creating, the system of sending students into this learning journey that is very rigid, very tightly controlled by government. And that was the argument, was that created the possibility that this unjust war could happen. And so there's there's many books. I just chose three interesting ones, three books that I love very much. And one of them is this book that I've discovered first in this book, in this school in India that on the shelf of my headmaster's house. And so there's others. There's Teaching as a Subversive Activity, which is an incredible confrontation of the problem that schools do and how teachers could do things differently. This book from Postman and Weingartner, Teaching as a Subversive Activity on the left, influenced our school very strongly and still does. It didn't do what School is Dead does. School is Dead confronts the fact that the whole system is corrupt. Teaching as a Subversive Activity says that the school is totally wrong and totally badly designed and has to totally change itself if it was to teach properly. And Letter to a Teacher is a very interesting example of this whole genre of many different books. Interesting, they all seem to have been published by Penguin, and they're all about the size. You've got the book in your room there. They're all a similar size. They're all produced, and most of them tragically are out of print, but some are not. And Letter to a Teacher is an interesting book. It was written in Italy. There was a teacher in Italy, priest. He was a priest, and he realized there was a deep problem for low-income students in Italy, and he somehow found himself caring for about 8 children in Italy, in rural village Italy. And he ended up convincing them that they're not worthless, they shouldn't be rejected by the society that they lived in. And he helped them think through what school means to them. And basically the students themselves wrote this book with his help. The students, a bunch of students wrote this book, which ended up being written as a letter to one of their teachers that they came from, the schools they came from. A very angry book, it's wonderful because it's in the voice of the students, and it's a very angry book about the school system. And all of these books are a little bit angry. All of the books are very critical. These are only 3 examples of this genre of books all at the same time, around 1969, 1970, and 71, about 3 years. And all of them are worth reading. And so I'll emphasize the book School is Dead because it influenced me profoundly. It was my first introduction to the book. And to give you a little bit of a context of the book now, I hope I'm not boring everyone. There was a very famous book in this genre. I should have put it on this list, actually. It's called Deschooling Society. Deschooling Society. Let me write it up here, even though I don't have a image of it, but I can write it in here. Let's just write it there. Deschooling Society. I see. Let me just try and reshuffle the presentation of this. Deschooling Society by Ivan Illich.
We are very up to date.
Oh, you've got it. You've got it. Oh, then why don't you show me? Let me stop sharing. Why don't you just bring it to the screen?
Yeah.
No, the camera. Hold on, I can't see. Yeah, there we are. Deschooling Society. Wonderful. So it's amazing. You've got have you read this book?
Yes, hopefully.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so then we've got even more context to teach to talk about. And so while you hold this book up, sorry, what's your name? Oh, yeah.
Toby, God is great.
God is great. How do you say your name?
Toby.
Ntombi. Okay. Ntombi. Okay. Is that right? Ntombi. Toby.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I see there on this list that Anselm sent me. How do you refer to Mr. Adodo? Is it Mr. Adodo or Anselm?
Anything goes. Feel free.
Father.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, Father. Even different. I'm just looking, Tombi. I'm looking at your list, but your class list, but I'm still struggling to find the Alua Tobi. Alua Tobi, thank you. Integral approach to transforming the curriculum of secondary schools in Atiba local government area of Oyo State. Wonderful. Okay, so thank you, Tobi. Alua Tobi, yeah?
Welcome, sir. Yes.
Thank you. So just to give you a picture, don't need to keep you standing, it'll be uncomfortable. So Ivan Illich was very, very successful with his book. It was even angrier than Everett Reimer's book. It was an attack on schools, and he said schools should end. We should de-school society. We should destroy the system, and we should create some new system. And he was very successful with the book, I think, because of everyone was so angry in America about the Vietnam War, for the same reason. And he wrote many other books, and that was his most famous book. And Everett Reimer was his friend. Everett Reimer, the book of School is Dead, was his friend in that world of universities in America. And Everett Reimer was a sociologist, not a teacher, a sociologist who studies society and analyzes society. And he ended up just taking the school as a phenomenon in society and analyzes the system. And my background is engineering, and I studied systems and how systems fit together. But in my world, I study systems like input of electricity and data and information that goes into a machine that's run by a computer, and it outputs my background is machines. But this book very inspired me because it takes the school as a machine, as a mechanism in society that makes things, that does things. And it's relevant to say that when mass schooling started, which was in America, in the United States of America, I shouldn't say America because that's also all the developing countries in North and South America. The concept of the system of a school came. We need to look at when school turned from the time when it was an optional thing for only rich children in the world into a system that everyone in the whole world should go to school. That was a big change. First, it happened in America, that everyone in America should go to school. That happened, I can't remember when, it's around 1930s. And when that happened, then suddenly they needed a whole big factory kind of system to get everyone, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people at the time, to go into this system of a school. And the best way that they could imagine that they could do that was to look at the factory, because the factories at that time were very successful. And it was helping the United States become extremely successful and rich. And the society loved the factory. It was amazingly successful. And the factory then was seen as the model for the schooling system. And if the factory was so successful, then let's create a machine like a school, not just for certain children who can afford it. We're going to create a system for every single child in the whole country, which became over time every single child, if possible, in the whole world. And that doesn't always happen, as Everett Reimer points out, but there was their vision that it would happen. And so there was the idea that the school would be a factory, like a machine, and you put into the machine children, and out of the machine, you put that young child in grade 1, or they go in 6 years old, and some countries like Korea and China, the machine starts at 3 years old, not 7 years old. And out of the system, when they're 18, comes a unit that's going to be good for the economy, for the industry. You're going to produce economic growth because you're making it happen through this unit called a child. And a child is going to be put into the machine. They're going to be changed, in a machine, in a factory. A thing can go from station to station to station, and each station you've got a new person and a new factory worker. That factory worker does a new thing to that machine, and it goes on, and there's a long assembly line there's good videos. I should show you, if we get time, a fun video of Charlie Chaplin making fun of the assembly line. But the assembly line is a machine goes from station to station to station, and out of the end comes a little, I don't know, camera, and the camera gets sold in, and it makes money for the company. And so the country thought, this is a brilliant model. We're going to send a child from grade 1 to grade 2, grade 3, every single age. They start at some age, and every country chooses their age, 6 years old or 7 years old or 4 years old, whatever. They put them in a uniform. They go from room to room. Every year they change rooms. They go to the next teacher. The next teacher does more things to their brain. They put more facts and more skills and everything. And then by the time they're 18, they're ready to graduate, and they are going to be successful in helping the country's economy grow. And that was the picture, and many people in the country loved it, and they thought it was brilliant. And out of that came the school bell, which comes from the factory. There's a bell in a factory to make sure when the workers are working nicely. There's the classrooms from classroom to classroom to classroom, all in a nice straight line often. And there's the very rigid curriculum that the government decides what the children need to learn, what does our country need to learn. And usually it's maths and science and not much arts. And now it's computers, because that's really important for children today, coming out now into adulthood today. They really need to be able to write Microsoft Word documents. So they all go into Microsoft Word classroom and write and do Microsoft. And then they come out and produce. So I hope that's a good context to show you here. Then if I go on here, here now I'm referring in, I've only got three more slides, and then I'll open for discussion. So I hope I've done it from memory. I haven't read the book recently, a few years ago. So I'm doing this from memory, but there is 2 wonderful chapters that really are profound pictures of the machine called school. One is what schools are. And it's difficult to know exactly what schools are. And it's this, the school is compulsory. You have to go. And if you're not, in many countries, I'm not sure about Nigeria, you must tell me if this is the case. If you don't go to school in many countries in the world, officially that happens in South Africa, but in reality, children can sneak around. Certain countries, families are able to hide their children and go to an alternative school. But many schools, many countries like United States, if you don't go to school, you have to register your child for a home school. And your parent will be, as far as I know, I'm not American, but officially this happens in South Africa as well. You are supposed to send your child to the government and register your child to, let's say, be studying at home. If you're not in a registered school, the government is supposed to come and look at your parent and see if the parent is qualified to teach their child. And if they're not, they are illegal and they could be arrested officially. And so there's a compulsion to do this. And compulsion means 5 days a week, every day. And in South Africa, it's 188 days, I think, per year, 196 days per year or something, that children have to, by law, attend school. And usually, almost in every system, it's a very strict age. And if you're a certain age, you should be in a certain grade. And that grade has a very strict curriculum or syllabus, a very tightly controlled syllabus that they must learn certain things. And officially, certainly in government schools in South Africa, and many schools try to resist this in the independent school system, but officially, you are supposed to do certain hours doing maths and certain hours doing English and certain hours doing history and languages. And it's extremely tightly controlled. And there is this, it comes out of this idea of a factory. And you can see this photo that I've included from long ago, an old school, of very, very strict rows and columns. And it implies the culture of that school. The teacher is in control because the children must face the teacher. They must be quiet. They must listen to what the teacher's saying. And in effect, they must actually guess what the teacher is thinking, because the teacher is asking questions and the children must try guess what's in the teacher's mind, because there's only one right answer and only the teacher knows that right answer. And so there is the factory model that the children need to be passive and be manufactured into an economically productive unit for the country's economy. And there is the idea of a total institution, which I think is Reimer talks about. And the total institution is, there are only a few total institutions in the world. Prison is a total institution. A psychiatric ward, a psychiatric hospital, where your whole life is in there. It's either in prison or a psychiatric ward. A military base is a total institution. And there are certain organizations like that. And a hospital sometimes is like that. And a school often is a very much all-encompassing total institution that the children's social reality and understanding of the world and experience of sports and arts and life and friends and everything happens in that place and in that organization, in that community, which Reimer was extremely critical of. And then you've got what schools do. And schools advertise the fact that they are education institutions, that they are what we do is we educate. But in fact, they analyze the time spent in a school and the amount of time that teachers actually are in the role of teaching facts and skills and concepts and knowledge. And usually it's not actually much happening. education only happens a small portion of the time in that total institution. There are other things that the schools do. Very important role, and maybe the most important role. Children need to be safe and be kept in a place that's safe, called childcare, because their parents need to go and earn money, because they also need to be producing economic value and be part of the economic system and the growth of the economy of the country. And they can't do that if the children are going to be in danger. Sometimes companies will create a childcare service for very young children in the company, but when they go into a primary school age, then the school can take over that role and can offer the childcare. And there's a trick that it's presented that they're going to be educated, but one of the main functions of a school is to keep the children safe, so that the parents can work. There is also these other two functions of the school that Reimer talks about, Everett Reimer, and he talks about that schools also separate families into classes, or children into classes, and meaning upper class, middle class, working class. And if you're not at school, you're often very low working class, because you're not even able to get, you already are not able to work you have to be in the farm, because you have to help the parents, or in the factory, because sometimes the family is so desperate that they need the children to be helping in their factory. And certain countries still suffer with this problem, that the schools can't take care of the children are being forced into labor. And so there is the argument that schools, there's an argument against Illich and Reimer, that schools at least offer safety to protect children from the farm and from the factory. And the schools at least are an improvement from the time when the majority of the society were in those factory systems. And so there's a good discussion that's worthwhile having of whether who's right, Illich or these other people who argue for schools. And then you've got Reimer talks about indoctrination, and I've used the word socialization, because sometimes children, there's justification that children need to learn certain ways of the way society works, or at least the way dominant society works, to become successful, to be able to enter into a university or into a company and be able to succeed in the game of that society. And it often is a game. It often is a game because the upper class has certain ways of being. And if you don't know the game, you're not going to succeed in the society, and therefore you're going to be poor. You won't succeed in employment because you haven't learned the game that schools can teach you. And schools teach you not because they're teaching it in the curriculum, but they teach it because they teach obedience, and they teach sitting up straight and sitting nicely at a desk and being able to behave in a way that is acceptable to the world of companies and the world of government and the world of the upper class society. So there is this illusion from a society that we believe schools offer education, and they do, but it only offers a small portion of education. A small portion of what schools do is only partly education. The others are these other three things. And so Reimer very eloquently talks about each one in a very eloquent way. I thought maybe it's helpful to talk about a little bit of the model of Kairos School, but before I go in there, because maybe I'll pause there and open for discussion before I do that. I think it's really important to offer the argument against Illich. So there's a book called, also out of print, What School is For, by Hanan and Gilchrist. Also out of print. I don't think you'll find it. I can't remember how to spell Gilchrist. I think it's like that. And it's also a brilliant book. It's also very, very well written. It's fantastic. But it very strongly confronts Ivan Illich, which Toby is holding. It's a very strong argument against Toby. I mean, not against Toby, against Ivan Illich and his book, Deschooling Society. And his argument, their argument in this book, What a School is For, talks about how that Illich is saying we should destroy schools because they're evil. But if you do that, what you're doing is you're sending, and Illich talks about how factories could be educational locations, and how companies and how all the industry could be offering educational services. But what these people talk about is how that basically sends children back into the system of the factory and helps the society abuse children like they used to do in the 1900s and the 1800s. And there are terrible stories of how children were bullied and poisoned and died before adulthood because they couldn't cope with their bodies couldn't cope with the system of the factory floor, or the mines. Actually, the mines were a big place for where children were used. And Illich, ignoring the fact that if you cancel the system of the school, the low income and the working class people of the world would suffer enormously compared to the upper class. And the argument of Illich is a privileged position because he's assuming that parents have the ability to teach a lot and the companies would protect children, but they probably wouldn't. The society would probably bully children and especially bully working class children. And so it's worth seeing if that book's available. Otherwise, I can try get it to you in Nigeria. I've got the book. It was actually being rejected by my university library, so I was able to take it. It was all coming apart, and I took it to a bookmaker and got the book restored. So I've got one of the last copies of this book, but it's a wonderful confrontation against deschooling society. Anyway, I think that's my presentation. I can come back to this picture of our school, but let's pause there and open for questions. 11:45. I hope I haven't wasted too much discussion time.
Okay, let me say and undo that. Okay, so thank you very much, Mark. Yes, I think it was very enjoyable, and we have discussed these topics in the last 2 or 3 days, talking about this thing, and we are keen to know the solution. What is the model? Because we spoke about co-creation, critique of existing realities, but what we are doing is providing solutions, not just to critique. So we are very keen to hear from you. And we know there's a problem with the educational system in Nigeria, even in Africa and globally. So we're exploring what are the alternatives. That's how we came to the book, The School is Dead. And your school represents an alternative model. If it does, how can we learn from what you are doing? And then if we can learn from what you are doing in your school, why is it not happening? Why is there no partnership between Kairos in South Africa and other private schools in Nigeria? That's my own question.
Excellent. Thank you. That's helpful. And let me offer you a very brief answer, Father Adodo, and then I think it only can be a brief answer, but let me try and do this. So we've got a model that I've created a diagram here and a little one photo of our school. But I think it's very important that we've created this ourselves, not myself. I bring my influence and the team grows, and each time a new teacher joins us, they bring their contribution. In fact, we've got a teacher, a very young teacher, 23 years old, just turning 23 years old. And She's joined us. Her name is Fiso Kuhle, and she's new teacher, just joined us, and a new teacher herself. And because she's got the freedom in our school culture, she and a school parent have created an extramural called Kuluma Kairos, which means speak Kairos, which is in the language Zulu. And it's an extramural to speak Zulu, because we want to improve our speaking Zulu in our society. And it's even inspired parents to become interested to learn Zulu. And this is even the Black children in the school who are only speaking English in their lives. So many of the Black children also don't speak Zulu, even though their background is Zulu. Some of them are Sotho, but and others, but we've got Black children whose parents speak very good English, and they're starting to lose their family heritage. So there's a project now to inspire white children and Black children to be able to recover and learn Zulu either for the first time or learn it again. It's an example of a teacher just joining us have the freedom to create something in our school. And if I were to move and immigrate to Lagos or somewhere in rural Nigeria, I wouldn't recreate Kairos. I would be interested to know what's happening in the team of founders that join the project to start a school. And sometimes there'll be parents, and that is sometimes a risk, because if parents start the school, then parents will always run the school. So it's a good idea for teachers to try and start a school, in my experience. But whoever is starting the school, they need to bring their passions and their inspirations. In the past, we've had a teacher who we want to know what they love. And if they love music, we're going to make them bring their music into the school. If they love origami, they're going to bring origami. We want to know what they are passionate about. And somehow we integrate their loves and passions with their vision of starting a school, because education could be so open-ended. And I think that's really relevant. I understand you using the transform model. Is that right? You go from through ground to emergence to navigation to effect. Is that true?
Yeah. Sure.
Yes.
So that's so relevant that is kind of relevant to my process. In fact, I should say that I also did this process as a master's student. And I was looking at creating a curriculum for my college at the time called CEDA in low-income South Africa. And we were looking at ways of looking at how to create an educational curriculum. And what was very important of the process is to look at my own childhood, my own background. I had a lot of experiences in rural South Africa with Shangaan people playing casino cards with workers in the back compound while I was a child. And that influenced me quite profoundly as a white child in South Africa during apartheid, when things were very fraught and a very dark time in South Africa. And that time of my childhood influenced how I was working as an emerging teacher. And that work informed my creation of Kairos. And so we sit in circles enormously in Kairos. We still have desks, and we still sometimes face towards the teacher and towards the board. But often in the time, we are also sitting in a circle facing each other. And that's a very African and Afrocentric model. And it's very relevant to my journey as a teacher, because I joined something called the Mankind Project, which I think I've maybe mentioned to Father Adodo in the past. We've tried to create it in Nigeria. I think it's still happening. And that work happens in a circle. And the work comes from indigenous Native American civilization, where we sit in circles and engage with each other, facing each other, where everyone's equal in the circle. And that's very relevant to the culture in Kairos and the ethos in Kairos. Every child has a voice, and they know they've got a voice. And we need to teach them etiquette over time, because sometimes they become rude because of their knowledge of their voice and the power of their voice. And it is a wonderful journey of them learning appropriate behavior because of their authority in the school. Even though they still call us, still call me Teacher Mark, and they see me as an authority, and yet we deeply listen to them and open spaces for them to speak and come up with ideas. And similarly, teachers have a very strong voice. And I'm the head monster. I call myself not the headmaster. I'm the head monster, and I struggle ethically with my role as a superior, imposing something on the teachers or the staff. And I would very, very seldomly say we need to do something because this must happen. It's very much part of the ethos in the school to raise questions. I'll raise a question in the staff meeting, we discuss it, and we'll decide together by consensus, is this what we're doing? Sometimes we'll also offer input from the children and from the parents if it's a very important discussion and decision. So that's my answer, basically. So my model here I can talk about, but I'm reluctant to. I want to hear your ideas, because your grounding and you're out of your ground from the emerging out of the ground, linking your own individual biographies with your local context of your situation in either your own vision of your project, or in your family or your company or your school or your university in the actual Ibadan University. That's relevant to your creation of a school. And basically it's the permission to give yourself that, to claim your right to create something different, meaning to, as an activist, to declare yourself having the permission to do it. And there might be ways of manipulating or negotiating the system of Nigerian education to say, where are the loopholes in the system to be, how free can a school be? How can a teacher be, to liberate yourself as a teacher or liberate yourself as a school community from the imposition of the curriculum.
Okay. So, questions or comments?
Why don't you say your name? I'm wondering if are you able to come up to the camera, and it will be helpful because you might also be able to come up to the microphone. Just to be, if you're asking the question, it'll be really helpful just to see you more clearly. If you want to, otherwise, if you're not, don't feel pressured.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mark, for that very rich background into what you are doing. But I'm curious. I'm wondering, from engineering to teaching, did you have to take classes or degrees in teaching before you can start Kairos? Or how were you able to transition from engineering to teaching?
Yeah, great. Good question. Sorry, what's your name again? Omlali. Great. And it's a new language for me, and I'm unfamiliar with the language. It's an excellent question. I'll answer it creatively, because I think often students who go into teaching straight out of school and then straight into a job teaching in a school are then part of the, I don't want to say too critically, but they are part of the system, and the system is a problem often. Sometimes the system is helping, because a child could be coming out of a worse situation, and a school system can at least protect a child's well-being from an emotional, social point of view. But there's so many limitations of what schools do, because there's an opportunity cost. There's so much the schools are not doing, and the society doesn't recognize what schools are not doing. And they don't recognize how oppressive schools can be, and how anxiety provoking schools can be for so many children, so much so that some children can't cope and they have to leave the system or move to another school, and then sometimes move several times. And sometimes my career is an advantage because I wasn't beginning the career as a teacher. And so I don't much use my engineering, although I still teach maths for the students. And I'm still even in touch with my grade 11 graduate who left us 5 years ago and 4 years ago, and still help him in maths because of my engineering. But that's less important than I analyzed systems, and I got to understand over 4 years in engineering and then in masters to understand how things work in a machine and analyze it from an abstract point of view. And now I came into a system and influenced very strongly by Everett Reimer, who understood the system of a school. So I was able to use my engineering mind to read that book and could see, even though he's a sociologist, he was seeing the school as a machine and a system, and he could analyze it very carefully. And that helped me become a very relatively unusual teacher, I think. And to answer you, I still got into Waldorf teaching, and I especially chose Steiner School training, even though I didn't get a degree for teaching. I just went to train I trained in a college that didn't give me a qualification. I only got a qualification in a Waldorf school system, and it allowed me to be very creative as a Waldorf school teacher. So this Waldorf system allows me to be free because of that system. And after I left that system, I was pushed and pressured to go into the university and get a qualification as a 35-year-old. I was with 18-year-old classmates, and I was 35 years old, and I was able to spend 1 year to get a qualification. And it was very interesting because all the boring subjects that everyone had to suffer, like educational law and classroom management, they're very boring subjects for a teacher. But I had lived through the problem. I had suffered, and I couldn't manage the wild child, and I suffered because of legal problems and the rights of a teacher versus the rights of a child versus the rights of a parent and the rights of a school. And I've suffered through that myself. I've been in tears. I've really struggled, and I needed support a lot. And now I go to a class where I could study this boring subject. It was fascinating to me. And all my classmates were falling asleep. And I was writing notes very carefully. So if possible, go into a school first, go teach first as much as you can, and then go get the qualification.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Other questions? I'm going to look at my class list as well for understanding your names, because your names are so difficult for me. What's your name? You're Toby. You're Aloha Toby. I recognize you.
Good morning once again, sir. My question is, as an integral researcher, and we have been able to put it into practice.
Yes.
So what are the challenges you had in settling your schools, and how were you able to overcome it?
Yeah, great. Sure, it's been very difficult, and it is still very difficult. We're still vulnerable 11 years later, thanks partly to COVID, your friendly virus next door. I assume COVID is also giving you trouble?
Not really.
Not really. Wow, you're very lucky. We're going to our fourth wave of trouble. So currently, the reason why I'm able to meet you now is because the school is in quarantine, and so the children aren't at school. So therefore, I can have this meeting. So we've really struggled with things like that, unexpected events in the school community. But I think it's a wonderful question. I think what I wish I could have is a mentor like me. I wish I had me 10 years ago to say, do this and do this and do this, and handhold me through a process of starting the school. I wish I could have. I spent a long time. I spent about a year before the starting of the school, getting the school ready. And I wish I had someone to say, you really need to do this and this and this, because I didn't do all the things that I really should have done, like got all my paperwork together and timetable and curriculum documents and policies around sexism and racism and policies around employment contracts and internet screen time. There's many things that could be done, which has taken many years to do during the holidays, because I never get time to do it during teaching time. A huge part was the money. I was very lucky to get finance from my family to help start the school. So you need financial support. And if you don't, you need a model to plan for the financial support. Either parents to join in with a mission, and you need a financial model that is carefully thought through. And there could be different ways of thinking that. There could be sponsors, there could be bursaries, or you could have rich children buying two places, one place for a rich child, one child for a poor child. Or you need models that are creative and carefully thought through in advance from a financial point of view. And the finances comes with a lot of other things like bursary policies and debt collection, and what happens when parents can't pay, and what's your approach to issues like that, and salaries and the financial, how you're going to manage the balancing salaries versus fees. We're not a country that we can lean on finances from the government. Some countries offer. I assume Nigeria is similar to South Africa. We don't get any money from the government. And then the property itself is an enormous problem. I think if we had a bigger property, we probably would have started a high school by now, or a kindergarten at least. And the property is extremely difficult to deal with. And we saw properties, especially in the city, is extremely difficult. Maybe in the rural areas, things would have been much more easy to do. Yeah, is that answering? I'm sure I would have a better answer.
Yes, sir.
I think maybe you need a friend in the background to help you along the way. And maybe that's one of the easiest things to do, to find. You can always lean on me if you are starting a school itself, like a primary school like ours. You certainly can lean on me. You might need someone in Nigeria to know Nigerian schooling system. But if you have that person who can say, I'm going to hold you for 10 years, I'm going to be there and not run away, you can lean on me for questions and advice. That would be extremely valuable to do.
Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.
Good day, sir.
What's your name? Hi.
My name is Victor.
Victor. Okay. Naoma.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's good having you, sir.
Good. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
I have a few questions here, but the first one is when you look at the chart you gave us, there's a village setting there, where you say that it takes a village. Okay. At this level, can I continue?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm showing you I'm just showing you the image that you're talking about.
Yeah. So at this level, what are those principles and fundamentals that we can imbibe in the village settings to create difference in our community towards integral development?
I think, tell me what the options are. It depends on how much power you have in your position in your life or in the school. It depends on your autonomy and power. Do you want to give me an example?
No, I'm looking at the principles. What is those things that we can do at village settings to create difference towards integral development? I think that's the best.
The principles, are you asking about the principles that guide the idea of it takes a village?
Yes, sir.
Is that the, okay. Sure. It's such a difficult question, Victor. Let me think how to answer that. I think it's a difficult one because every context is different. There's a man called Etienne Wenger who I can introduce you to. He's an American in San Francisco, and he's got a very interesting openness to be contactable. Etienne Wenger has started an idea called communities of practice, I think it's called. Have you come across him?
No, sir.
So Etienne Wenger, it's communities of practice, and he had a vision of helping schools around the world, in fact, but I think he was too ambitious and had changed his mind in the end. I think it's called something like schooling. I'll have to get back to you on this, but he's got the idea that communities of practice are very, very specific, and it guides my principle that I can't easily give you the principles that guide Kairos School of Inquiry in Johannesburg to another context. We've got our own logic, and it's very difficult to hand over that logic to another system. And when it does do that, problems happen because you've got another community trying to copy us instead of being inspired by their own principles and their own vision and passions. And having said that, there's still the general idea of partnerships between the different groups of the parents and the children and the teachers, or the school and the home as an integration. And the school and the home is a community, and the school and the home also has a necessary partnership with the society. And that might mean government, and it might mean business, and it might mean other players in the world, in the country or the world sometimes. I mean, for instance, Kairos could have a link to a school in Nigeria, and then our partnership would be part of that village, that system in the school that's starting in Nigeria. So there is the idea of partnerships, and I think maybe it's relevant to talk about non-violent communication. I think, let me just try to summarize that. So there is this idea of being alive to the moment and be open to what's really alive, not just in the moment, but what's happening for the individual in the moment. And if the child is feeling unhappy, or the teacher's feeling unhappy, in some uncomfortable feeling, maybe sad, angry, embarrassed, or afraid, that needs to come into conversation, and it needs to be brought into the room, into conversation. And because of that, in the system that we're asking about, you've got the parents, but in the parents, there are groups of parents. You've got the rich parents and poor parents, or the black parents and white parents, or the women and the dads and the moms, and you've got the different groups, and sometimes they are impacting each other in ways that they are not aware of, or they're doing it, they're aware of it anyway. Usually they are unconscious about their impact, of their negative impact on each other. And it's important to try bring the impact to life, to conversation. And that can be volatile and in a little bit sometimes dangerous, but there is this idea of nonviolent communication, which is a modality that one can learn and be trained in. We have people in Belgium who train us, and they train us at a great discount. And I know I've had a person in my Zoom room before from Uganda, so I'm fairly confident that we can bring in people from Nigeria in very unusual contexts. And it's a training to learn to be able to have these difficult conversations in a way that's safe, and to build an ethos and a culture in the school that is safe, so that a Black parent can tell me, the white principal, you being racist. And I can say, oh no, am I? And please say more. And I can hear how I might have impacted a parent in a way I wasn't aware of. And we can have a conversation about offensiveness is a nice word. A parent just told me this last week. There is offensiveness as a way of bringing to life what's happening to in the community, but usually in the car park and usually in the dinner table, and maybe in a corridor in the classroom, because between certain people, but not in the staff room and not in the parent class meeting. And we want those class meetings to happen, and we want that to come to life as much as we can. If that's possible from the outset, from the seed of the school, and builds the example, then it builds enormous amount of strength for the future.
Okay, thank you. So another question I have here is about everybody is reading a book. You read a book that changes your maybe way of doing things, and you now made a difference. What actually struck to you about that book? What is that? Because everybody is opening a school, and you also read a certain book that changed your maybe model about thinking that now made you to open up a school. What actually in that book that strike your imagination or your thoughts?
What was it about that book that inspired me so much? You're saying, right? I think one reason is that I'm training in understanding systems through my engineering, and I'm seeing someone analyze a school system as a system, and that analysis was very interesting. But I think that's not the full answer. I think so personally, I am a small person. I mean, I'm short. I can't show you my height compared to another person next to me here, but I'm short, and I was very small as a child, and I felt I struggled with that myself. I felt very small, and it made me very difficult through my schooling journey. And so I suffered enormously, partly because of that pain, but also because the school didn't support me in dealing with my pain. And so on the one hand, I have got pain in my life around school, and therefore I can imagine a different kind of school for future children. And here is an author who's very eloquently writing in a way that's, this school is wrong. It shouldn't be in place. It should be different. And it's a vision of a different kind of society. And I have a different kind of background. So I have a vision of I share with Everett Reimer an imagination that schools could be different, especially for the schools, the children who suffer more, and it's often lower income children who suffer because of the system of a school. So, the book starts with the fact that the school itself is an elitist institution. The school exists as an elitist system. It favors richer families that come out of privilege. It rewards children who come from families who have got more literacy in their family background, and it punishes children who don't. If they are at school, it punishes the children who, some children have to actually work and can't even attend school. And those are the lucky ones, according to Reimer, because the ones who got caught in the system because they can afford the school are going to be impacted because of the system. So I think my I suppose, psychological wounds and my healing out of my wounds, and my experience of what is possible through a healing has inspired me to imagine that school itself could be different, and it could be intentionally healing for children, even though before they have to go into adulthood and go to deal with problems of their childhood. They can deal with their problems from a day-to-day basis because they're talking about issues and they can share what's going on for them, even if it's that they're scared of maths. If they're scared of maths, let's talk about your fear. Let's not punish you and try to push you to learn algebra. Let's deal with your anxiety, and let's help you deal with anxiety in a way that's going to help you. I'm hoping that I might be a bit confusing myself, because there's also this book here, this Teaching as a Subversive Activity on the left here, has also influenced me a great deal. And that also looks at a school that's really caring and respectful to a child. So these two books kind of speak to each other. And also this other one now is a third kind of book, because it very strongly criticizes the Everett Reimer book and Ivan Illich book mostly. It's the book mainly responds to Illich. I'm hoping that's not a confusing answer. Victor?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm getting it, sir.
Okay, good.
So the last one I want to ask, so that I'll give other people a chance to ask, is if you can identify for us one or two things, one or two differences your school has made. That is what made it to be different from other schools, where it becomes an alternative. Thank you, sir.
Just to be clear, Victor, are you saying in what way we are different, or the impact we have made to the world?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. As an alternative, yes, am I getting it? As I learned from this discussion that your school is an alternative model, sir. So I want us to identify, I want to know the area where it becomes different from the schools we know already. How is it an alternative?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So certainly one answer that we are able to, but I'm able to say very easily, is that many children severely suffered in other schools and came to us deeply wounded, and then turn around within a month and they're suddenly happy and joyful and learning brilliantly. So it's very clear that certain schools are oppressive and children are being forced into medication and psychology rooms, psychotherapist rooms, and all they need is a bit of a more careful, respectful, loving school environment. Not just from the teachers, but from the whole school community. Often it's the teachers create the atmosphere, and the children take on that feeling of empathy and kindness, and they create the care for the child coming in. So almost all the time when a new child comes into our school, they are a project, and children feel welcome on the day, and without exception. Very, very rare. We've had very unusual stories of children who are, we've had a child we've had several children who are gender non-conforming, so they are a girl that feel themselves a boy, or vice versa, and they are not bullied. They don't even, it's not even a huge thing. The children accept them fully in a way that's difficult to explain why. It's something that lives in the waters. A parent has explained it lives in the water, that children are very, very kind with each other at Kairos. And then that's one answer, but I can answer this by just show. I recently presented the school. And there's my big PowerPoint. And on this slide, let me just, sorry, this is here. This I'm just looking for the slide here. So there are a list of innovations that we do that are very different to other schools. On the left is kind of philosophical orientations or general overview principles, and on the right are very specific techniques that we do. A huge one that I can emphasize is nonviolent communication. So most of our teachers have already been trained a little bit. And several of our parents have done it, and we talk about it to the children as well. And there's also something that I see is not on the list there, called trauma sensitive schooling. And it's a way of coming to understand the one's own anxiety, own fears and anxieties, and what helps us individually feel comfortable or uncomfortable. And that's a whole other modality called trauma work, trauma sensitive schooling, or somatic experiencing. Our policies of discipline, I see there's items on this list. There's items that we do that is not on this list. I better update it. There is something, we don't have school rules in the school. We've got agreements that we have something like a contract. Even if they're 6 years old or 13 years old, we have a set of agreements that everyone joins and makes an agreement. It's in the beginning of the year, we negotiate the agreements, and teachers make the agreement and children make the agreement. And sometimes someone breaks an agreement, and it happens a lot. And then the child offers an act of an apology, an act of accountability, or the teacher offers an act of an accountability. And so there's a deep democracy between us to say, sometimes we're going to make mistakes, and mistakes are acceptable, but we're going to do it with an apology. And we're not just going to say sorry, we're going to do something as an apology. And it builds a sense of empathy and kindness, I think, so that the children aren't coming to school afraid of being wrong or being punished. They're coming because they want to be there, and they know that everyone's learning, we're all doing our best. And sometimes teachers are going to make mistakes, and children can alert us to that, and vice versa. And it works very well. You might have questions about this list, why I'm putting it up here. Maybe Victor, maybe you have a question of everything on this list is a little bit different and not common, not frequently found in most schools around the world, I would say. But maybe some of them spark your interest.
Thank you, sir.
Good. Anything else? Any questions about this list from anyone?
Last question.
Another question.
Okay. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Yes, I would like to ask you 2 questions.
Sorry, I missed your name again.
Phillips.
Phillips.
Yes, sir.
I'm just bringing up my class list here. Phillips, I see that, Phillips, from Phillips Terminiolua.
Yes, sir.
Great, good, go for it.
Though you mentioned this, but I would like you to be more practical. You said that at the point when you finished reading the book, School is Dead, you held it up and you said something. There are sometimes that the passion is there, but the time when you want to act, you don't know the first thing to do first. You have the agitation, you have the passion. And after you finished reading the book, what was the first thing you did? What was the first step you made? So let's say that we have the same path, let's say we have the same call. What do you think is the first thing we should do if we have the same vision as you? What's the first step I should take? And then my second question is that you talked about system by default creates opportunities more for children from elite families. The school system also by default also creates more opportunity for children that are bright, that are on the bright side. Even games and competitions that children engage in state and international competitions are for children. They are for only children that are bright. What's the curriculum that you have advised as a professional for children who have learning disabilities? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. 2 questions. Let me try go one at a time. So when I finished the book, I was still in India and I was still teaching in the school in India. So I think what I did differently is I started to look, certainly as I was reading the book, I was going back into the class every day, and then finishing the book, I continued to, my eyes were opened, in a way. I suddenly saw the school system that I was attending day by day differently. And I also saw my own schooling, my own childhood differently. And I could start to analyze my understanding of the school. And I think I just started to look differently. I started to see, oh, this is happening. And I noticed the book just talked about that. Here's the connection again. Here's the fact that the children have to come to school. It's compulsory, for instance. Or here's me telling them, well, algebra is important. You must learn algebra. I have to teach it to you because it's important. And I started to understand that on the one hand, it is important because there's a game that is a necessary game for the children's survival in the world, but it's a game, and I started to see the game. And I think that the opening my eyes was a new thing happening. And then coming back to South Africa, coming home, I started immediately talking to people. I started to meet, explore different ways of teaching in South Africa. I looked at different NGOs in South Africa. What is happening? I'm a bit of a networker in my ground. So my personality is, I look for different interesting people. I think that's why maybe I'm been chatting to Father Adodo. And I started to meet interesting people in South Africa around the ways of what is happening in education and in school in South Africa. And it introduced me to, that happened when I was 26 and I'm now 51. So all these years I've been doing the same thing, and I've been continuing to pay attention to unusual methods, alternative methods of teaching in schools. And I can share with you, there's lots of ideas out there that is different and possible. And sometimes it's you need to create a whole new school like we've done, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes if you just learn nonviolent communication as one idea, you can do that anywhere. That can happen in any school, anywhere. And it doesn't even have to be in a school, it can be in a company. Anywhere, it can be in a family. So there's ideas like that. There can be, there's ideas, there's a lot of ideas out there, and they neglected because they are, because the system itself is so strong. And the system is, the school is part of the system that creates the very rigid curriculum and the very rigid factory-based schooling system. The school is only a part of this very much bigger challenge that we're sitting with, as that is a necessary challenge. You can't destroy it. That would be dangerous, but you can be at the cutting edge of the system and feel the way that the system is starting to change, and be finding out what those changes are. And it's a slow evolutionary change, and I think it's possible to be alert to those ideas. And then the question is, sorry, just Phillips, tell me again. your question about what? How do you call them? Lower skilled
learning disorder. Children who cannot they cannot be accommodated under the conventional way of learning,
okay.
the typical way of learning. So there should also be a curriculum for them. Like the school that you propose or the school that we all want is a school that can accommodate all kinds of students, irrespective of your learning differences. So we shouldn't have one school for this, one school for that. School generally should accommodate every kind of children with different learning differences. So as a professional, what do you suggest should be the curriculum for children with learning disorder?
So I think there's an easy answer to that, in that our school, Kairos, is a school for mainstream children. We're just a school that's alternative, and we're still heading the children into a conventional high school and the conventional matric, and very likely the option of a university if they want. If that's a huge pressure to us, because it limits our ability to be different. We already, when they're 8 years old or 7 years old, we already have to be anxious about their progress when they are 13, because if they fall behind in maths or English, mainly, they're going to be at risk of getting into their mainstream high school. If you have a situation that parents are already accepting that the child is not going into a conventional schooling system, there is an enormous advantage that they are freed a little bit from the system. And the society is excusing them already from having to get that matric, if that's the case. If the parents and the group are accepting that child doesn't need to get matric, we just want the child happy, and we want the child to be going into adulthood in a healthy and happy way, there's a huge opportunity, because you don't have the curriculum pressure. The danger is you can neglect parts of the child's education. So there is a risk that you can excuse the child from learning, and then the child can just become lazy. But assuming that's not happening, assuming that the school system is healthy, you've got the opportunity to work on all, and you can, then the idea of multiple intelligences from Howard Gardner is relevant, but Steiner, Waldorf is also relevant, where you're teaching the head, you're teaching the heart, and you're teaching the hands and feet. And the head is like maths and concept and skills and reading and writing, and you need to be able to read a book. Or letter to a teacher is relevant, because those children were probably in danger of being labeled mentally disabled. This book here, letter to a teacher, many of those children would have been labeled as mentally disabled, and yet they wrote this book that is profound. And these children, I think, were flown to England at government cost because they were so successful in the book. And so it's first, so I'm saying you need to teach the head and make sure that even though they are diagnosed as mentally disabled, it might not be true. It might merely mean that school hasn't been teaching them successfully, and maybe they're going to be a successful researcher one day. It's possible. It's just the opportunity is the parents and have given up on forcing them into the system. Then you need to teach the heart, meaning emotional education, learning how to speak in a healthy way, learning the feelings, learning unmet needs. What do you need in your life? But also myths of the world. So myths of Nigeria, myths of ancient India, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, all the ancient stories, the fairy tales of long ago are extremely relevant to one's emotional education. That they experience them imagining themselves as the, I don't know, king of Uruk in ancient Sumeria, and having to fight this wild beast of a man called Enkidu. And I was teaching that this year to my 12-year-olds. And they love the story, even though it's an ancient story. It's one of the most ancient stories in the world. And that story, their experience of that story is very relevant to their hearts. And then what's very relevant to children who are struggling with their education is to learn skills with their hands and their feet, but especially their hands. So woodwork and metalwork and anything like crafts and knitting and crochet and weaving baskets. This is not a low income thing only, although it is relevant that they could end up earning money if they're low income. But even upmarket children who are going into who are part of a privileged schooling system, even there, knitting and metalwork and woodwork and craft and weaving, etc., are very valuable to their education. It's relevant to their minds. It helps them feel comfortable and calm. It helps them feel productive. It helps them feel that they are doing work and they are valuable citizens of the world. So even a very rich child in America often does this kind of craft work with their hands. And so if they can go into handwork, heart work, and head work, I would say that's the way of designing a curriculum for any child, basically, but it's especially relevant to a child who's been kind of rejected by the schooling system. And it's wonderful that there's a wonderful opportunity with them being rejected, because they are excused from the pressures of the system.
Okay, so
thank you. Wonderful questions.
Thank you so much. Yes, well, I would love to continue, but we need to stop to go to the next session. But personally, I've enjoyed your conversation. In fact, I've not heard you speak like this before. So a lot must have happened. Probably the spirit of COVID that have changed your.
Yes. What did we do last year? What did we do? Did I present a PowerPoint? I can't remember.
Not really. You didn't.
Okay.
You were actually moving. You were on the move, and children were disturbing you. I think the school. Yes.
Right.
But much. We enjoyed the conversation, and I will be in touch again. There are other things for your friend, the guy Adams.
Yes.
Pray for him.
Wonderful.
That organization, the main organization, and all those. Yes.
Wonderful.
COVID interrupted the whole process. What he said. Hopefully, Omicron will not reverse everything again.
Yes.
We'll talk about that. So thank you so much. And,
thank you, everyone. Also,
I think they enjoy your conversation also. Thank you.
I'm happy to if you want to email me questions, I'm happy to continue answering. And if anyone's actually starting a school or is part of a school that wants to use our ideas, I'm happy to be in touch with anyone like that. It will be wonderful connection.
Yes. I think they are planning to do that.
Please welcome.
Thank you so much. So bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Bye-bye.
Gmail.
He wanted to give us his Gmail.
No, I will type it for you. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
They will be in touch with you personally, those who wish to.
Excellent. Okay, good. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.